Now, steps 8 and 9 are going to ask us to do our part about it. They're telling us we need a little more action. This is the part that probably separates an awful lot of the men from the boys and the girls from the women in AA. It's the restitution part of the program. It says we have then completed step 7. That's where we closed off yesterday. Now we have more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Where did we get that list? We made it when we took inventory. Now, how many of you have been to programs where they tell you after you do your 5th step, burn your 4th step? Take it, flush it down the toilet, get rid of it, it's out of your life. Any of you ever been told that? Sure, a lot of people have. And that's people who come to conclusions in their head as to what you're supposed to do in this program instead of reading the directions. There's another case of it. See, somebody decided they were going to do something dramatic and make it like it's an ending. It's not an ending, because we have to make restitution, and we're going to use this list to help us. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We're going to start repairing the damage we have done to other people. We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. What does that mean, we ask until it comes? Pray about it. And one easy way to make amends is do the ones first that you're willing to make, that the ones you can do the easiest. The ones that become a little more complicated, pray about them. And if you're sincere about your program of recovery, you're going to get such a good feeling about the amends that you do make, you're going to want to go through all of them. And it may take you a long time to make your amends, but that still puts you in a daily program. There's no time frame. I can tell you something like this. My financial amends took me 12 years. About 12 years to make all my financial amends. What did that mean? If I couldn't make all my amends, that my program stopped, it ceased, I couldn't do anything until all my amends? If you look at the 9th step, it says, made direct amends wherever possible, not whenever possible. Just that one word throws an awful lot of people off. So when you look at the steps, you see it says wherever, not whenever. So we're gonna try to make amends here, and we're gonna become willing to do it. How many people who are unwilling to make amends for the damage that they have done? I've run across very few. When a person becomes sincere about his sobriety and this new way of life, and he's enthusiastic about it, everything falls into place for him. And strange as it may seem, the sicker the person is, the more willing they become. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Who made that agreement? We did when we went for help. Now we're going to start off now in the same sequence that we did our 4th step. The first amends this book is going to deal with are the resentments. Then we're going to deal with the fears, and then it's going to go into the sexual conduct. So now we start off with dealing with the amends of resentments. Probably there are still some misgivings. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. We might prejudice them. At the moment we are trying to put our lives in order. But this is not an end in itself. Underline this. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and to people about us. And if you ever hear a speaker in AA talking about, my priorities in a program have now become God, my fellow man, and me, got that right out of the big book. We just read it. But this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Again, Exactly what we've been speaking about for 3 days in the recovery process. If we want to recover, our lives become a life of service, not of getting, but of giving. It is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. He is going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. In other words, we don't want to get in the amends process too early talking about God and bringing spirituality in my life. We want to generate goodwill by saying, look, I've offended you maybe verbally some way down the line, and I want to tell you that a lot of it was alcohol. And instead of going into the steps and telling them why we're doing it, eventually they may ask us this, but keep it on a lighter approach in the beginning, especially if you haven't a long record of sobriety yet. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. Supposing you go to overcome a resentment and the man says, gee, you're doing about the same thing that we do in our church, and that's part of our program in church or something else. You can say then maybe he opens up the door, yes, our program deals with God also. It's designed maybe to get us back to our church. You see how you can play it by ear there? The door will open up. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. You know where most of my amends were made when I really got into this program? Right in AA. The people that I was seeing regularly. I assassinated a lot of personalities in here. I hurt a lot of people verbally. And I went to some people and I said, you know, I was telling you one time some things about John, they weren't true. I want to apologize for lying to you about John. And some of the people would say, we knew that when you were telling them, you know. And I would go to John and I would say, you know, John, I didn't like you in a program. I told a lot of lies about you. And, well, why did you do that, Bill? And I would tell him I had a resentment toward you. See? This is what this thing is all about. It's not just going to sit down and hear a speaker. And I don't know if you've experienced it yet or not. Evidently you haven't because you're fairly new in treatment. But when we start going through this process, something happens to us internally. There's the big change that's going to come about in us internally. Not head knowledge, experience-wise. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply, we tell him we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. Well, there's your fifth warning. We will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. That's your fifth warning. These are the symptoms of relapse that AA has. And maybe what I'll do is I'll put them down on paper, or the 7 or 8 or 9 warnings that are there, and have the office make a copy of them. And you can take them with you. And then in your own program, you can see if you're going through any of the symptoms of relapse, you'll have them before you. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own faults, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. In other words, the action here is to satisfy our needs, no matter what the outcome may be. And strange as it may seem, it says maybe 9 out of 10 cases are good, 1 case is bad, where we try to make amends. Most leads talk about the one time that they were thrown out of office, like they really had a rough time at it. I found out when I got honest about this program and I went about making amends to the people I'd hurt, you know, some of them were so happy I was drinking, anything I said they accepted. You know, people know what's happening to us. Everybody about us knows what's happening to us. I rode in an automobile with some people and my program started changing. And they would say, well, you know, Joe, he's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. They tell me all the garbage about him. And then at the end, they would end up and say, well, we can't say too much about him because he's sober, isn't he? But they've already poisoned my mind. They've told me all the garbage, and then they say, well, we can't say too much about him because he's sober. Be careful of that kind of conversation. If people start poisoning you about other people, try to stay away from that. I'll give you a good example. I led a meeting one time in Avon, and this is before God became a part of my life. And there was a certain man that was a topic of conversation repeatedly in AA. And somebody pointed him out to me that night. And I knew everything about this man. And I led my meeting, and I put him on a spot. I could see him squirming. He knew exactly who I was talking about. And after the meeting, everybody came up to me and said, boy, you sure gave it to so-and-so tonight, didn't you? I said, I sure gave it to him tonight. You know, and I went home that night, and I was laying in bed, and I was thinking to myself, you fool you. If they had not pointed him out, you would not have even known he was there. I led a meeting about a man that I knew nothing about, just gossip and criticism and negative statements. You ever have that happen in your life? That's the kind of things we want to clean up. It's a simple little thing. But I've learned since then, if you can't say something good about somebody, don't say anything at all. And your life gets a lot more happy. That's what they deal with, resentments. Now we're going to go into the fears part. And the fears part in this book are going to deal with money and actions that may have been dishonest. Starting with this, most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. There's your 6th warning. If you don't pay back your debts and overcome your fear with your creditors, you won't stay sober. And I can attest to that. When I first sobered up in this program, I didn't pay anybody back. I ran with a guy who told me, you take care of number 1 first. If you don't take care of number 1, nobody else will. That's the type of philosophy I was living by. The most difficult thing there was for me to do in my life was to open up my wallet and take my money and start paying back my bills, paying back for my bills. I was sober 27 months one time before I got drunk. And during that 27 months, I paid nobody any money back, but I bought a new car. I drove it around, honked the horn at everybody, and showed everybody what AA was doing for me. Material gain. Didn't keep me sober. The 6th warning, we must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. I sat down in a rehab unit that's pretty popular in the Cleveland area, and I was servicing steel mills at the time. I was a salesman, and during the lunchtime I stopped over to this unit, and while I was there I heard a fellow in a silk suit talking to another man across the table. And he said, "Go down to the courthouse and file chapter so-and-so, and you won't have to pay them back any money, file bankruptcy, and they can all, you can wave goodbye to them all." And I said to the man, I said, "Are you in the AA program?" He said, "Yes." Why, I said, "Who told you that?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I was always told when I came into AA, you make every effort to pay back your bills." He said, "That's the way they used to do it." And I said, "Well, it hasn't changed since I've been around here." So, you know, don't look for the softer, easier way. Sometimes it's the most complicated way. And of course, if you have a wife and family, it'll tell you this. You can't be grandiose and start paying everybody back, and then you can't pay your own bills and your rent and your food supplies. You have to use some common sense. But there may be some things you do recreationally that you can cut out to have some money to spend. I told, I can't remember if this group or not, I gave up smoking cigarettes to put something in the basket. That was my contribution. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up all the money to number one. And here it's listed as alimony. I call it all the money. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. This is a common form of trouble too. I went through that. I can tell you exactly what happened. And they threatened me with another year in jail for non-support. And you know, I was making my support payments out to my children, and I resented it. And I went to see my sponsor. My God was becoming a part of my program now. And I told him, I said, "Dan, every week I have to make this check out. I get a resentment. I'm fighting off booze. Every week I got to do this." He says, "That's because you were ordered to do it. Put an extra fin in there on your own and don't even have it recorded." And I jumped up from the chair and I said, "Didn't you hear what I said?" He said, "You were ordered to pay it. Give a little something on your own." And I started throwing an additional $5 in there. And I'd like to tell you immediately it went away. It did not. But after a couple of months, I started feeling pride in myself for doing this. And you know what? Other things started changing. My job improved. I made more money. I don't know if that was the cause of it, but I sure didn't plan it. I was telling somebody the other day, you know, there's laws of gravity, there's laws of electricity, there's laws of hydraulics, and there's also spiritual laws. We choose to believe all the other laws, but we negate the spiritual laws. And I'm a firm believer there are spiritual laws. If you follow them, things happen for the best. Although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. How do you ask again? Prayer. So you're praying for a specific issue there. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he had not paid all the money to his wife. She was furious. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. We suggested he write his first wife admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course she did not, and the whole situation has long since been adjusted. I want to tell you something about support payments today. You won't get away from them. They'll follow you wherever you go. And if you ever get any income, your Social Security number is registered, and they're going to snag you. The best advice I have to anyone is if you have problems with support payments, contact the court or something and immediately make a gesture to pay it, because they're picking up guys left and right anymore. The best thing to do is, if you're obligated to pay. You can't get away from it. There's been a transformation in the court system. They have a whole bureau now, support bureau, that's out looking for people who have not made payments. And if you get any kind of a job or anything else, they'll come right down there and snag it. So be careful. Before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, and asked God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Give you another example. There was a fellow that I know who worked for the steel company, and he worked in what's known as the wire gang, and he and two others had been stealing cable, copper cable, from the steel mill. So he came into the program and he sobered up and he wanted to make restitution, and he went in and he saw the general foreman and he said, "Me," and he mentioned two other fellows, "have been stealing copper cable from you, and I figure roughly my share is $2,000. I want to pay you back." He couldn't understand why the other two fellows got angry. You know, you don't want to implicate other people. How could he have done this? He could have gone back and said, "I have been stealing copper cable and I wanted to pay you." If he didn't want to implicate him, the restitution is the important part. He could have made a money order out to United States Steel Corporation. You don't have to endorse it. It's valid without a signature as long as the corporation is listed. He could have sent the $2,000 there. The restitution is important. But be careful you don't implicate other people in your amends process. That's what they're talking about. You can't drag other people in this because you're willing to sacrifice part of your life. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he's one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. All right? In the rehab program that I did in Cleveland, I know of 3 fellas after treatment who took themselves to court and turned themselves in for charges that they had committed, crimes they had committed. I don't remember if there was warrants on them yet or not, but they turned themselves in for the crimes. All three were sent to institutions. All three are sober yet today. One of them started a business, an electrical company. He's doing very well at it. One went back to Pittsburgh, his hometown. But you know what they said? They got into this program. They accepted a power greater than themselves. They believed in it. They wanted the slate wiped clean. They didn't want to go through sobriety with the fear that next year or 2 years or 3 years down the line somebody was going to come and snag them. I'm not telling everybody go to prison, but I'm telling you, if there's things that may create fears in you, it's better to have the fear relieved. All right? Only you can make that decision. Now we're going to go into the sexual conduct. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. In other words, they're saying, again, what I have said. Whatever defects of character we demonstrate in this program, the general population has them also. Alcoholism is not a matter of defects of character. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. He is having a secret and exciting affair with a girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. We heard that the other night. There's a lot of examples like that. On most podiums, when I came into AA, they used to have a quote up there that said, "No alcoholic could ever take what he dished out." That's true. I know a lot of fellas chased women, found out one time their wife went out and that was the end. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Can't understand that. They're talking about the wife gets worn out. I used to be in domestic relations court, divorce reconciliation department. And when I was there, I would bring prospective divorcees in. And I would say to the man, I would say, "Gee, why are you divorcing your wife? She's such an attractive woman." "She's frigid." "Frigid?" Yeah. So we have a little conversation. I go to certain details, and then in would come the wife. And I'd say, "One of the reasons your husband says this divorce is occurring is because you're frigid." This one woman in particular thought for a while, and she said, "You know, he's probably right. Do you know what it is like to be sleeping in bed at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning and have him come home drunk? He hasn't brushed his teeth all day. He's been eating blind robins and hard-boiled eggs. And he's got that sour breath, and he shakes me, and then he tries to make love to me." She says, "That's what I associate with the sexual act, that terrific bad breath." The alky doesn't know that when he's in his cups. He doesn't know that. He doesn't know he's offending anybody, does he? See, so there's some reasoning behind some of the things that happen in our, there's some logic behind what happens in our domestic life. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, And though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. In a general way, you know, there's some things that have occurred in our marriage that may affect the trust level if you knew all about them, but I want to tell you that now that I'm sober, nothing is going to occur like that again. I want our relationship to be a good relationship, a general review. You don't have to start mentioning Mary, Jane, and Helen, and then like most guys, they brag, they add 10 more onto it, like they were in demand. It says, our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. What do they mean our way of living is not a one-way street? The steps, the program. We're going to bring that out in the chapters before we complete the book. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy, or he. You know, we have female alcoholics today. A high percentage. I think something like 35% of the alcoholic population anymore are females. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. You know your spouse better than any sponsor or anybody else. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalmanship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than face-to-face combat. If we have no such complications, there is plenty we should do at home. If we don't have any complications with sexual issues at home or unfaithfulness or anything else like that, it's telling us there's plenty we can do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. I hear that repeatedly in AA. I came in here not to drink. As long as I don't drink, that's all right. Let's hear what the founders say about that. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead. I sat in a bar room one evening, and I was drinking with a man, a very gentle man. And you know, I wasn't too gentle in a bar room. I was known as the barroom bully, I guess you call it. Always in fights. And as I drank with this man, I thought to myself, why can't I be a gentleman like him when he drinks? The barmaid would come by and he said, may I have another drink, please? He's paying for it. Would you pass me the salt shaker, please? Would you give me a bag of potato chips, please? And he was so pleasant. You know how I got. So one night I was short of bucks or something, but I wasn't drinking so heavy. And the bar closed about 3:30 in the morning on daylight savings time. And he said, Bill, how would you like to come over for breakfast? Gee, I would enjoy that. And I left the bar room, and we weren't too far from home, and we walked to his home, and the screen door was hooked. You know how they had those little hooks that went in there? And there was no key for the door. And he stopped at the door, and he picked his foot up, and he kicked the screen door in, and he put his hand in there, and he opened up that latch, and he went through the hallway screaming. Oh, I won't use the language. Telling his wife to get out of bed. He brought a friend over and start cooking breakfast. And I was embarrassed. I was halfway sober, you know, and I sit down and think, my God, out there with people that he's paying everything for, he's so polite, and here he is home with his family, and look how he's treating them. And I remember the little kid coming in the hallway, and he's looking and get your butt to bed too, you know. I want to talk to you, I'll tell you what I want to. And I'm sitting down and thinking, I don't act like that at home. You see the difference? Sometimes, you know, when this book says we are very much the actor, oh boy, well, be careful of the role you play. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. Underline this. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. We feel that a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. And when you're sitting down at an AA meeting and you hear a guy say, all I came in here was for sobriety, you just tell him, yes, the big book writes about you. The founders say, we believe you're unthinking when you say that sobriety is enough. He is like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife he remarked, don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing? What did the fellow say the other night? I quit drinking, everything's fine. Failing to understand the damage we have done in the home. To the parents, to the brothers. My brother came over one day and said to me, why don't you change your name? I'm sick and tired of people asking me if you're my brother. Why don't you change your name? I'm proud of mine. I'm making headlines. You know, there used to be a restaurant, Do Drop In. Article says, man does drop in. Right through the window I went. Drunk. I get front page for that. I can go on in what was happening in my life as a result of alcohol. And all I had to do was quit drinking and accept this way of life, and it's gotten better. I tell an awful lot of people, did you thank God for your addiction? If it wasn't for your addiction, you would never have had a chance to meet me. Yes, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. Who does the reconstruction? Not the family. We take the lead. Just read the black print. It's telling you what's necessary here. A remorseful mumbling that we are sorry won't fill the bill at all. Now this next line is, I'll bet you 99% of the alcoholic population in AA does not know it's there. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. How many of you people been in AA before? 90% of you? How many of you ever sat down with the family and analyzed the past as we now see it? No one. People don't know about the rehabilitation process in this book. Exactly where we started the rehab with resentments, sexual conduct, and fears. And now it's telling us make amends. All of this is done for the healing process to overcome our addiction. Being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. That's a prayer. This program is loaded with prayer, but people are not aware of it when they're reading it. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. See how important that is again? Bill got nervous when he wrote it. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought not to urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. This is very important. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. Most AAs have picked that up, and when they lead, they stand up before a group and they say, but we don't have to be used for a doormat. You ever hear that? Mm-hmm. And I used to do it publicly. Now I come up to them after the meeting and I would say, would you give me one example where you allowed anybody to ever use you for a doormat? As if by becoming humble and doing what's necessary, we're going to be used as a doormat. Nobody has ever used me for a doormat, but I have used several other people. Okay? Don't allow the impression that if you do these things, you're going to become a doormat. You're going to become spiritually strong. Some amends cannot be made. I told you people I was in an accident, 2 people were killed, and one of the persons was in my car. Now there's no possible way I could have gone to that family and they were very disturbed with me. And not too long ago, I had a call for help from a woman. And they had no place to put this other girl who needed help. And I had some friends and we got together and we got her placed into a local detox unit. We paid for it. And after the local detox unit, she got into a female rehab unit and stayed there for about 70 days. And she was in the program. She went back home. And one day I was leading an anniversary and she came there with her husband and they were sitting down in a group. And there was another fellow sitting there with her. And at the end of the meeting, this is just in the last 5 months, at the end of the meeting, the man came up to me and he shook my hand and he said, December 21st, 1956, I hated your guts. I could have killed you. And I said, why? He said, I'm Joey's brother. I said, Joey who? And here it was the man that was in the car with me. He said, you know, I had an awful lot of hate toward you. He said, but that's my daughter. You saved her life. There's no possible way but through AA that could have ever occurred. All right? If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Those are the 12 steps, the 12 promises that everyone speaks about in AA. Yet we found out there's more than 12 promises. We had promises after the 3rd step, promises after the 5th step, promises after the 9th step, and you're going to find more promises yet. All right? Now, for an individual who comes in here and listens to some of the misinformation, you may fall by the wayside because you won't go through this process. You notice the promises that we record so often and speak about in AA occur after the 9th step. And the 9 steps says we may direct amends wherever possible. If we are painstaking about this phase of our program, the only part of the program that they speak about being painful is the direct amends. Because the most pain that we can have is we have to open up our wallet and pay back. That's painful to alcoholics, believe me. I'm not kidding you. It's difficult to do. There were many times I would like to pass that up. But I sat down at a meeting and a man said to me one day, he said, "You don't have to make direct amends." I said, "You don't?" He said, "No. You stay sober one day at a time and live different, and you'll be making living amends." So now the 9 steps should read, made living amends wherever possible, right? It doesn't say that. It said we made direct amends, and the reason it says direct amends because there's a reason for that. Those promises start occurring. Now for an individual who comes in here and says, all I came in here for was to quit drinking alcohol and not drinking is enough, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as he doesn't drink, I'm happy for him. If people quit drinking without AA, I'm happy for them. I don't make judgments on them and say, well, they're not happy. I met some people in AA I'd like to give $10 to. Here, man, go get it out of your system, you know? But let's look at this. If a man works for minimum wage, what is minimum wage? About $4.65 an hour? $4.65 an hour. Let's use that arbitrary figure. Now, you can't say he's unemployed, can you? Because he's working for minimum wage. Now, if that man is satisfied with minimum wage, that's his prerogative. If he's satisfied with $4.65 an hour, great. But supposing now he was offered a job with all the fringe benefits, paid insurance, paid hospitalization, expense account, automobile, a stock ownership program, pension plan, sick day policy, investments, he would be foolish to refuse that, wouldn't he? What would you think if a man, if you was working for $4.65 an hour and you heard that your buddy working on a job was offered a position that paid all these fringe benefits and then increases and he turned it down? What would you think? The guy must be goofy. That's exactly the way I refer to an individual who says, I'm satisfied with not drinking. He doesn't get any of the fringe benefits. He's passing the whole package up and staying down there at the very bottom. Not drinking is not the ending. We hear this repeatedly. Not drinking is but the beginning. The beginning of what? The beginning of working a whole new process to live by. We must not drink to work the program. Now we're coming to the part of the program that a lot of people refer to as the maintenance steps and such, and I don't know if they're maintenance steps. I consider them myself personally growth steps because that's the words that's used in there. But what have we covered so far? You find out that we've gone from the admission that we're powerless, our lives have become unmanageable, we need a power greater than ourselves, and we made a decision in step 3 to bring this power into our lives, and we started going through a process to clear the way for this. Now, a person said to me yesterday, you mean if I go through the steps and I get this done, then I won't drink anymore? There's no guarantee that because you went through the steps you're never going to drink again, unless you maintain your spiritual condition. So a lot of people think that because they have a spiritual experience or awakening, they'll never drink alcohol again, are mistaken. You must maintain a fit spiritual condition to abstain from alcohol. And if you notice the symptoms of relapse that are there, if you haven't fulfilled those obligations and you don't continue watching for resentment, self-pity, and fear, alcohol come back into your life again because you're not fit spiritually. If you start doing things that are contrary to God's laws, you're not living spiritually. If you're trying to find God in your life changes and becomes a cleaner life. That's all I can tell you. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. What have I just stated in those 3 or 4 lines? A 2-part proposition. Did you dig the 2 parts out of it? This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory. And, put above that and also. And if you read it, and is a conjunction which means also, it would read, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory, also continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. It's making a distinction here. It's telling you we're continuing our 4th step inventory, which the 12 and 12 states is the beginning of a lifelong process. All right? Now, some people, in the beginning, if you're doing these steps early in your program, I mentioned yesterday, you'll do a 4th step and a 5th step to the best of your ability and go on from there. But you're surely, as you grow spiritually and your life changes, you're going to find out that there's areas that you overlooked. And if there's areas that you overlooked, you're going to continually do your 4th step to improve upon it. You can't stay sober to do your 4th and 5th perfectly. You'll never do it perfectly. I don't think you can do it any better than I did. And I tried very hard to be perfect. It's not possible. This is a growing process. Look at what the next words say. Let's read those once more. This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. That's telling you daily also. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit. What's that? The 3rd step. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. In other words, we have just entered the world of the spiritual. Now we're going to grow in understanding and effectiveness by constantly practicing it. Now look at what the 9th step contains. We just covered the 3rd step. We have entered the world of the Spirit. That's 3. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And it tells us what? This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. To grow in understanding and effectiveness, it should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. What's that? Step 4, inventory. When these crop up, we ask God to remove them. Steps 6 and 7. We discuss them with someone immediately. Step 5. And make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Steps 8 and 9. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Step 12. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Step 11. In one paragraph, you have redone, recompleted the first 9 steps. Step 10 is a continuation of the first 9. And if you start practicing the first 9, you're also going to include in there now your daily steps for inventory, which will take place in the 11th step, and it's going to be a surprise to a lot of people, but I'll show it to you. And you're going to go into 12th step work. What are going to be the results? Did you hear so much of the 12 promises in step 9? We told you promises is 3, promises of 5, promises of 9. Now this next paragraph you can read, it can either be promises, but as I was reading them as promises, a man sitting down at one of the big book weekends said, Bill, that sounds like the recovered to me. By God, I looked at it, and yes, they're explaining how we are recovered. And here comes the explanation of when we are recovered in AA, and it comes after a continuation of working these steps daily in our lives. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. It's telling you And if you work these steps daily, you're not going to be fighting alcohol anymore. Isn't that a release? For by this time sanity will have returned. Now let's look at this. Sanity will have returned. How does sanity return? By working through the steps. By making a decision, an inventory, a fifth step, a prayer to have defects removed, making amends, we're restored to sanity. Yet a lot of people say in AA, they say, it says God could restore you to sanity. It doesn't say it would. Did you ever hear that? I hear it repeatedly. That person's passing off misinformation lightly. It tells me right here, for by this time sanity will have returned. Not just by making the second step, but by going through the whole process. Then sanity will occur. We will seldom be interested in liquor. It's telling us we're not even going to be interested in liquor. Do you know when I came into this program, I spent more time fighting booze than I did anything else? If I go here, if I drink, if I do this, will I drink? I became aware of television ads, newspaper ads, magazine ads, billboards, heard drunkalogs. That's all I did. I kept thinking about alcohol. My mind was saturated with thoughts of alcohol. I don't have those anymore. That's a release in itself right there. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. That's release. We react sanely and normally and find that this has happened automatically. We react sanely and normally. We're not reacting in fear with alcohol anymore. I don't want to come to AA meetings and live in fear. I don't want to come to AA meetings and have somebody coming to me constantly talking to me about you got to be fearful of getting drunk. If I had to come in here and live in fear, I would have been out a long time ago. I am offered hope in this program, that a hope that through a spiritual experience I'll be released from all these complications with alcohol. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes, that is the miracle of it. Our new attitude toward liquor, it's a miracle, our new attitude. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. That's happened. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in what? Fit spiritual condition. There's recovered. Now, if you want to go back through the things that I said and number them, you have about 12 more promises in there, if you want to call them 12 more promises. The first one is, for by this we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. That's one. For by this time sanity will have returned. That's two. We will seldom be interested in liquor. That's three. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. That's four. We react sanely and normally and find this has happened automatically. That's five. We will see our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's six. That is the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. That's seven. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. That's eight. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been, we have not even sworn off. That's nine. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. That's 10. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That's 11. That is our experience. This is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. That's 12. There's 12 more promises after the 10th step. See, so I say this program is loaded. The potential for our life and our lifestyle so vastly changes in here as a result of spirituality that when we read this book, it seems as if it's so deep we can't comprehend what's occurring. And that's why we started big book discussions that take us page by page, line by line, to become involved in the black print. You know where most people have problems in this program? They don't stick with the black print. What do they read? The white spaces in between, and they insert their own ideas. Each line in this book takes you to the next line. If you don't know what you're reading, look at the questions on a page. Write the questions down. The questions that are asked will be answered. And that's what's meant in there when it says all your questions are answered in the big book. It doesn't mean your own personal questions. Should I buy an Oldsmobile or a Ford? Should I take X-Lax or Kaopectate or all this kind of stuff? That's not the kind of questions. So somebody misinterpreted all your questions are answered in the big book. They thought they meant my personal questions. No, all your questions asked in the big book are answered. That's what that means. Now it says it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. You know what that means? Sit on your tush and just don't do nothing. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. In other words, it's telling you you can't let up on your spiritual action. We are not cured of alcoholism. Recovered does not mean you're cured. It means that you're not going through all them conditions we just talked about. Sanity will have returned. You won't be fighting it. The drink problem will be taken away. That's recovered. But you're not cured. You put any alcohol back in your system and you're going to get drunk or more than drunk. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. A vision of God's will. Here's how we come to it. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. What is the proper use of the will? Just covered. You see how you can hear something and not grasp it? Thy will, not my will, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our will along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. In other words, saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not my will, be done. These are thoughts which we can use constantly. Thy will, not my will, be done. Now, a lot of people come into the program, they go through the steps, they're enthusiastic, and early in the program they will continue doing their first 9 steps. And then eventually they become second nature to you. You find out that you don't formally have to do it on paper anymore. But in the beginning, people usually keep doing it on paper. And after a year or 2 years or 3 years, you find out it just becomes a natural part of your living day. But there are some groups, and I read this in the 12 and 12, and Bill Wilson writes about it, who schedule twice a year, every 6 months, to do a formal rewritten 4th and 5th. It doesn't matter how you do it as long as you continue doing it. If you're growing spiritually daily, that's good. But don't rest on your laurels and stop and come to a certain plateau, because then you're coasting. Do you know the only way you can coast? How's the only way you can coast? Downhill. Don't start coasting, because that's downhill. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed what? Suggestions? Directions. The steps are not called suggestions here, they're called directions. They were called ideas. They were called a plan of action. They were called directions. But all anybody ever remembers who wants to be a rebel in there, the steps are only suggested. That's the only word they remember. That's the rebellious part, the nature of the alcoholic. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become what? God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. What's the vital sixth sense? God consciousness. But we must go further, and that means more action. In other words, the admission of being powerless, all right? The acceptance of a power greater than ourselves, the decision to do this, the inventory, the amends, and the constant working of this program, we have to go farther. Now, how do they suggest we go farther? Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. Now, just for a consensus in the room, what have you heard about prayer and meditation? Prayer is what? What is meditation? Now, somebody told me that when I came into AA. Prayer and meditation. Prayer is when you talk to God. Meditation is when you listen to God. So I spent about 22 years trying to hear God. Believe me. Well, just how I got into the various occults that I got into and everything else. And some gave me mantras, and some gave me code words, and some gave me chants. But I was always in wanting to hear God. I knew how to pray. I learned that when I was a little kid. Give me a bicycle, you know. Give me a car. Isn't that the way we pray? It's the way I prayed. We're going to clear some things up here. 22 years in AA, I said to a Franciscan, I said, Brother Theo, I said, I have much trouble meditating. He said, why? I said, I go into my room regularly to meditate. I pray, I spend 15, 20 minutes a day. And which reminds me, I forgot to bring that out. It's good to set a certain time a day aside for yourself, just like an appointment with the dentist. If you have an appointment with the dentist, you surely try to make it, don't you? You don't miss it. If you have an appointment with yourself every day to be someplace at a certain time, try to maintain that schedule. And that's for my prayer and meditation. And I do that. The family gets a giggle out of it because I always end up asleep. But I do what's necessary before that, but it relaxes me. And it's usually 4 o'clock every day. I try to be alone with myself and God. So I would say my prayers, and then I would meditate. I would listen for some sound from God. I would hear the telephone. I would hear the kids. I would hear the pots and pans. But I never heard God. So I said to Brother Theo, I said, I have much difficulty meditating. He said, why? I said, I've never heard God. He said, well, Bill, you're a Christian, aren't you? I said, yes. He said, well, read something from the Bible and meditate on it. That's the Word of God. You know, it took 22 years to get that cleared up for me. Read something spiritual and meditate on what you read. That's listening to the Word of God. How many times do we pray in this day? How were you told to pray in here? No, you're always told, ask God in the morning for what? And what at night? How many times a day do you pray? Twice? Sure. Now, I don't know whoever started the directions of ask God to help you stay sober in the morning and thank Him at night, 10 seconds of prayer, 24 hours of sobriety. I never know who started that, but that's what I was told. Till I got a sponsor who clarified it for me. How did the founders suggest we pray, or how often do we pray? Let's look at it. On the bottom of page 85, it says step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. All right? We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude toward it and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. Now it's going to tell us how we pray when? At night. Look on the next page, or next paragraph, on awakening. And then on the bottom of page 87, where does it tell us to pray? As we go through the day. In other words, this program suggests that we pray all day long. And somebody's trying to nullify that. Shortcuts. Just ask God to help you in the morning, thank Him at night, 10 seconds of prayer, 24 hours of sobriety. Better men than we are using prayer constantly. My wife and I, if we go to a meeting and we hear somebody announce that somebody is ill or has a problem, we think nothing of joining hands and praying for that individual. Where two or more are gathered, there shall I be. Don't be hesitant on prayer. Mahatma Gandhi changed the course of India through prayer and fasting. You ever see the story of Mahatma Gandhi? There are changes, revolutionary changes, nonviolent. That's Mahat. And I read a lot about Mahatma Gandhi. And a man said to me one day, he said, Bill, he said, I believe you do a lot of prayer. He said, but it doesn't seem like you're doing too much with the fasting. But I don't know what he means by that. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, prayer and fasting is a big part of her life, her program. And a woman in Baltimore sent her a letter and said, Mother Teresa, I would like to come to Calcutta and work with you. And Mother Teresa sent her a letter back and said, you have Calcutta in Baltimore. Huh? That's exactly what we have in this room. We have Calcutta. We have some people in this room, whether we want to accept it or not, who are going to die because of their addiction. They won't believe that what is being presented here is necessary for recovery. May go out and use again, and some of them may come back. But a standard today is 50% of any program in a short period of time will relapse. All right? True from the very beginning. Dr. Bob and Bill. Bob relapsed. And those who relapse, a percentage of them will come back. Some will die. I have found out statistically over about 18 years of being in rehab that every group of about 25 within a year, one is dead. That's my statistic. Martin Luther King, when he came down to the bridge, prayer and fasting was an important part of his life. He believed in nonviolence. And he was met by the state militia. They had the guns and the dogs and the clubs. And they told Martin Luther King, turn around and go back. And what did he say? He said, we have come too far to go back now. And they got down on their knees and they started praying. And that afternoon on national television, people saw on the television screen people in prayer being clubbed. And that's when the civil rights movement won that day. If one guy had pulled out a gun, there would have been a war. Prayer solved that problem, not physical violence. And I always remember that. I got a big picture of Mahatma Gandhi and a quote by Martin Luther King about him in one of my rehab units. Done by hand. A woman did it for me. It almost looks like a photograph. You ever see it on the wall? All done by hand. Looked like a photograph. All right, let's go. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Our inventory now is constructive, not destructive. This is the part of the inventory we're going to tell you. You look at some of your good points too. It never told us that in our fourth step inventory. In a fourth step inventory, it didn't say we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs and our good points. But somebody said, you got to be a little positive because you'll destroy your self-esteem and everything else. So in a fourth step, you got to put your good points down. No. All you're doing in a fourth step is you're getting rid of garbage. But now when you start taking inventory, where are you taking it in one step? What step are they describing the inventory process to you in? The 11th step. You're in step 11. Remember I told you 10 is the coverage of the first 9? Here's where you cover step 10. In the 11th step, look at. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? That's a question. Do we owe an apology? That's a question. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? That's a question. Were we kind and loving toward all? That's a question. What could we have done better? That's a question. Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? That's a question. Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the mainstream of life? That's a question. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. In other words, put some good thoughts down about yourself also. Don't become negative. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Who has trouble taking an inventory at night? There's the most perfect inventory you can have. Right there in your 11th step for going to bed at night. You don't have to become original. It's done for us. It covers about every area that you can possibly be concerned with. What are they saying in this thing about not being too negative? If you're anything like me, you can tell me 1,000,000 good things about Father Joe, and I'll forget them all. You tell me one rotten thing about him, and I'll remember it till the day I die. How come? Because basically, this thing is negative. I'm the only one who can make it positive. If any of you ever read Viktor Frankl, A Search for the Meaning of Life, he makes a statement in there. He was in the concentration camps in the Second World War, and he was condemned to death. And while he was in that institution, he saw children who were starving. And he said he saw adults who would steal the meager portions of food from the starving children. And he saw others who couldn't stand the pain, and they would run and throw themselves in the electrical fence and kill themselves. And he saw others who were in the same circumstances with meager portions of food take half of what they had and share it with another individual. And he remembered that experience, and when he wrote about it, he said, we as human beings have one freedom no one can ever take away from us. That is the freedom to choose our own attitude about any situation that we're in. Who makes today good? Huh? Who makes today bad? Mm-hmm. Who makes the weather pleasant? Who makes it unpleasant? Get up one morning and you come down. I watch this in our rehab units. Guy sits down at breakfast, he looks at it, what kind of garbage is this? Cold cereal and rolls and this, oh geez, what a terrible breakfast. And the next day he comes down, he has the same breakfast. He says, man, am I hungry? Does that look good? What has changed? Uh-huh. My mother told me, son, it seems to me as if you have gotten up on the wrong side of the, what? Bed. What does that mean? Bad attitude. Go upstairs and change it. Anything that changes in your life, anything that changes about other people, anything that changes about anything, the more positive it becomes is going to be because of you. It's not going to be because of conditions around you. It's going to occur inside you. Okay? I can make this a pleasant journey, or I can make it unpleasant. And as the philosopher says, or the old Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with what? The first step. The journey into sobriety begins with what? First step. On awakening, now when we wake up, how are we going to handle the day? On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. Does it say anything about thinking about yesterday? Does it say anything about thinking about tomorrow? It says, let's think about the next 24 hours ahead, one day at a time. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from what? Self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Again, thy will be done, not my will. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Now, there may be some exceptions to that. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Even though it seems you're doing something good and you're putting on a show, if your motive is ulterior, be careful. Check your motive. Why am I saying or doing what I'm saying? If I'm saying or doing something because I'll get a consensus of approval from the people, but I know it's hurting somebody, look out. Look out. Check your motives. And thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not know what to do. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. Here we relax and take it easy. Whenever we ask God, how do we ask God? Prayer. What's prayer there? We don't know what to do. We ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. God help me. I don't know which way to go. It's that simple. Give me a little direction if you can. But it says don't act immediately. Relax and take it easy. Okay? When in doubt, don't. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the professional, the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind, but still inexperienced in having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. Yet some people will tell you that. Every action now after they go through the steps is God instructed. This is in regards to one of the areas we're covering about relationships. All right? I was sitting on my porch and a man came up to me and said, I'm getting married, Bill. Well, I said, gee, that's nice. Who are you marrying? He said, so-and-so. I said, well, gee, I said, she's about 20 years older than you, isn't she? He said, yes. She has about 7 children, yes. I said, are you working? He said, no. I said, is she working? He said, no. I said, how do you expect to support these children? God will do that. I said, what? He said, that's right. He said, I believe in God now. I said, all right. I said, don't you think there's a little difference here and maybe possibly adaptability between the ages? If God didn't want her in my life, why did He put her there? So you can go to the extreme in this. And a friend of mine was coming from a morning meeting. We happened to be riding down Broadway, and we were on a street that ran parallel for a little while. And another AA, who has since died, was traveling down the same street, but he had stop signs. He never stopped for a single one. And I saw him and I said, so-and-so, you didn't stop for any stop signs going down the street. He said, if God wants me in a wreck, He'll have me in a wreck whether I stop or not. See, these things happen. Everything is not God's will. You're not going to get completely dissolved to self-will immediately. That's what they're saying. Slow down the process a little bit. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. Now, we're awakening in the morning and we're going through the 24 hours a day and thinking of the plans for the day ahead of us. And the first thing you're going to get somebody say is, all right, you guys in AA talk about living one day at a time, don't you? Yes, we do. Well, I signed a mortgage today for 25 years. Is that living one day at a time? I have to sign a mortgage. I signed it for 25 years. I said, does that mean you're going to live 25 years? Maybe your plan of action for the day is to go down to the bank and sign a mortgage for 25 years, but it doesn't mean you're going to make it. You might die tonight. But that's your course of action for the day. You see, you'll always have these guys who come in here and try to throw loopholes into what you're doing. Use common sense. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will. We ask especially for freedom of self-will and are careful to make no request for ourselves only. Now that's difficult to do. You know, when that lottery was up to 31 million, I went right back to bartering with God. I don't know if that's the human part of me or what, but I said, 15 million for me, 16 for you, God. And then felt let down when I didn't win. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. When I was a youngster, my mother ran a grocery store, and she was our source of income. And all the kids in the block were buying wagons. You know, these red wagons with big wheels. And in the part of town that I lived, there was a hill. They had built it when the WPA was coming through the city. They had no place to dump the dirt from digging out the roads for pavement. So they built a big hill. And in the wintertime, we used that hill for sleds. And in the summertime, we went down it on a wagon because I wasn't riding a two-wheeler yet. And I said to my mother one day, I said, Mom, I would like to have one of those red wagons. She said, say a prayer to God, maybe he'll give you one. And I went to bed that night and I said a prayer to God for a red wagon. And that year, 3 kids on a block got a red wagon and I didn't. What do you think I thought about my prayers? They didn't work. And my sons were in sporting events and they played with the church. And they got together and the coach said, let's say a prayer that we win the game. And I said, oh, don't do that. Don't use a prayer on winning the game. Why don't you say, let's say a prayer, thanks God that we have the chance to play, may the best team win. He couldn't understand me. What happens if the other team wins? Their prayers are better than yours? I have found out that prayer for myself has always been answered when I got out of the gimme prayers. See, when I start give me this, give me that, it doesn't seem to work. But when I have prayed to be of service to other individuals and I may be of help to someone else, I get all the positive answers I want. When your life becomes a life of service and you pray just to be of service, you're going to get an answer. And I don't know if gimme prayers are really what we should be talking about. Anyway, that's something that's helped me. If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. How many people do that? We do at home. One of the best ways, and we try to start it here, anyway, whenever I come to the Jesuit retreat house, one of the first things I try to get the people doing, and we do it in our rehab units also, is when we serve the meals, we have the residents say grace over the meals. That's the first proposition I have found presented to the individuals in treatment to get them a little God-orientated, a little bit of spirituality in their lives. And it seems to work. I've had several people come back from the treatment center and say, you know, I started saying grace over the meals and I took it home with me and started doing it at home. And I see some people do it at the tables there at breakfast. It doesn't hurt anyone to be grateful. I still yet remember when I was sitting down at the table and I started taking this program home, and I said to my mother, I said, Mom, can we say grace over meals? And her jaw seemed to drop. I wanted to formally do this. Do you know why? I told you how I came in here. She started seeing something was happening to me in this AA program. You should have seen the day I told her, Mom, after dinner, you go read the newspaper, I'll do the dishes. I thought she's going to have a heart attack. You know? Because since I was 12 years old, I said, when I'm 12 years old, I'm never doing dishes again. See? And at home, I have learned I'm boss. Nobody tells me how much soap to put in the water when I do the dishes. If we belong to a religious denomination, which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. And there's some people come into the program now that have morning devotions that they have to attend to. If not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we have been discussing, the principles of service. There are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they offer. It does not say come into AA, say AA is my religion, and condemn religious people. And that seems to be the trend most recently in AA. Everybody wants to condemn religious people. Don't talk to me about this church business. Well, it was an important part of my recovery process, and we're going to cover some more of that. I think when you get into the chapter, The Family Afterwards, stick around for that one. You're going to find out what it tells a family how to live. There's about 40 suggestions of what to do and what not to do, and I'll guarantee you there's 95% of you people sitting here who don't know that it's in there. About 40 suggestions of what the family should do and what they should not do, when to do it and when not to do it. Now, it's telling us about praying as we go through the day. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. What does agitated mean? We're a little upset. And there's quite a few people who go through the days being agitated or doubtful, not knowing what direction to go. As we go through the day, we pause. That means slow down. When agitated or doubtful, and ask for the right thought of action. In other words, that's prayer again. God, slow me down. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. There's your conscious contact. God, slow me down. Prayer, conscious contact. Always relating to the Supreme. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show. In other words, we're losing self-will. I told you when self-will begins in most people, don't you? Usually in the teenage years, about 14 or 15. Starts at home. Give me money, give me food, give me clothes, give me shelter, give me, but stay out of my life. Don't tell me where to go, who to go with, when to go, when to do anything. I'm running the show. About 14 or 15, my family went out of my life, my religion went out of my life, my old friends went out of my life, and self-will became the dominant factor. Everything that's occurred in my life has been a result of self-will. What are we trying to do today? If you look at this program and the way it's designed, what are we trying to do today? Sure. And we're trying to live life as our parents probably told us to live it when we were little kids. We're making full circle. We're coming back from what we thought was independence that became dependency. We're getting rid of dependency and becoming independent again by a power greater than ourselves in our life. Humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." And if we say to ourselves, "Thy will be done" many times each day, we're going to get some more results, some more promises. Here comes some promises from the 11th step, just by saying "Thy will be done" to ourselves many times each day. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. Do you know how potent that paragraph is? Do you know how many people go to seminars with psychologists and they go to treatment centers and are trying to get some results to eliminate fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions? They're spending money to do this. And here the simplicity of AA says, we pause when agitated or doubtful, ask for the right thought of action, constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. And as a result of that, we're in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions. We become much more efficient just by the simple repetition of that, thy will be done. No wonder I can't see the forest. The trees are in the way. See what they're saying here? Now, the shortest paragraph in AA, it works, it really does, 5 words a paragraph. It works so well that when the founders of this program published that book, before it became part of the World Foundation, you know what they called the publishing company? Works Publishing Company. They took it right out of there. It works, it really does. When they published their book, they call it the Works Publishing Company. That's how they got the name Works in there. We alcoholics are undisciplined. You believe that? Just watch how many people want to stay up all night and sleep all day. Can't go to bed at a regular time. We're undisciplined. Regular hours, regular diet. What's one of the handles we hear so often in AA? Halt. Don't get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired. Put a normal life pattern, some structure into our daily life. We alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. But this is not all. There is action and more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12. Now, I'm a firm believer that everything that we have covered here today is exactly what you tried to cover on a 12-step call. If what we're doing here, when you go to see another person with an alcohol problem, and you present them the material as we're presenting it here today, you're going to have a higher recovery rate. How do I know this? Because I used to sponsor differently than I do today. I brought an awful lot of people to AA for 7 years. And for 7 years, the people that I brought to AA would stay here a year and a half, and 2 years, and fade away and get drunk and never come back again. But the rooms were full. I got a sponsor who gave me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous as I'm trying to present it today. And when I go out on a 12-step call, I try to follow the directions in working with others. And I don't bring as many people to AA as I used to, but I want to tell you something. The people that I bring stay. 24 years, 25 years, 23 years, 22 years. And when I start talking like this at a group meeting, you'll always have some old-timers say, BS. I never sponsored that way. I brought as many people to you as AA. I say, that's fine. Is this your home group? Yes. How many people are you sponsoring now? 3. How long they sober? 6 months, 5 months, 4 months. Did you sponsor anybody last year? Yeah, where's he? No hands. Anybody 2 years ago? How long you been in the program? 17 years? All you got to show is 3 people, new ones. Exactly what I'm saying. All right? This thing called Alcoholics Anonymous works. Don't sell it short. 12-step work, in essence, is the backbone of our sobriety. Sharing with another individual. That's what it's all about. That's what Elite is all about.